Thank you so much for calling in to our conference call tonight, and those who are calling in from other time zones, even during the day. We thank you for your time. My name is Reverend Tim Lateef. I'm the National Director of the Cure Clergy Network, and we're so thankful for you to be able to call in and have this important discussion. We will be talking about impeachment. We will also be talking about the impact the White House administration has had on the urban community across the country. We're so thankful to have our president and founder of Cure, Star Parker, on this call, who will be sharing some great insights on this topic, and also Richard Manning, who will be sharing as well. Along with me, I have my colleague Matt Waters, who will be sharing as well as we moderate this discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Tim, and thanks, Star and Rick Manning. Rick Manning is also the co-author of Star Parker's new book, Necessary Noise. Rick Manning is the president of Americans for Limited Government, a longtime public affairs professional. He served as public affairs chief of staff at the U.S. Department of Labor during the George W. Bush administration, where he was twice recognized by the secretary for exceptional achievement. He was born and raised in Southern California and graduated from USC. We won't hold that against you, Rick. And shortly thereafter became a lobbyist for the NRA. So welcome, Rick, to the call. Welcome, Star. And Rick, I'm just going to jump in and start with you. Tell us, what are the Democrats? What's your opinion on the Democrats' impeachment trial? Just broadly speaking, at 30,000 feet, what a few takeaways you can share with us today?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Thank you, Star, for inviting me to be on the call. This is a fishing expedition. It's a continuation of the entirety of the time of President Trump being in office, and it doesn't do the country any good. And that's what, if we were just playing games and this was, and there was nothing at stake, then you'd sit there and say, okay, well, go on your fishing expedition. It's just politics. But the fact of the matter is, what's happening is the rest of the world is being told that if you have a conversation with the President of the United States, chances are it may become public, which means you can't actually have a conversation with the President of the United States about anything you don't want people back home to learn about, which somewhat restricts the conversations. Secondly, that, gee whiz, your country may be thrown into turmoil because you may end up having everything you ever happens in your country being examined by a congressional committee. But third and most importantly, what it does is it says to people like North Korea and China and others who are major abusers of human rights and are dangerous in terms of the overall world stage, that, U.S. isn't paying attention to us, so we can crack down on people in Iran, and we can crack down on people in China, and we can go after the people in Hong Kong because the United States isn't paying attention. And as a result, they're distracted. And as a result, it makes the world a much more dangerous place. So if there was actually something there, the Constitution says go for it. And the Congress has every right to do so. But in this kind of plotting around, trying to put together a puzzle that doesn't really even, none of the pieces fit, it's absurd. And it does damage the country. And quite honestly, I think Nancy Pelosi should pull the plug.
That's very helpful. I was talking to Star, you and I, Star, before the call. Voter opposition to the impeachment hearings right now, according to Politico, no friend of the right, is at its highest point. 47% of independents are now against the impeachment proceedings. That's up from 37% just a week ago. So there's 10% growth of people opposed to this, and 46% oppose the Democrats' handling of the issue. Star, you've called out the lies of the left for 25 years, and I'm sure you can probably speak to that. Any thoughts about those numbers shifting at this point?
The independents are those in our society who haven't chosen a side in the cultural war. We are in that war, as I have said, for the last 25 years, but last 10 years it's been raging to the point that everyone who's paying attention to the political discussions can understand and appreciate that we can't go on as a nation the way that we are, and we're going to need to choose a side in this cultural war. And what is on the table? What are the two sides? Well, biblical and free. Those that are Christians understand that the core of Christianity is personal responsibility. Recognizing God as the final authority means that we have opportunity to make choices in our lives, but he prefers we make good choices. So when you're talking about a nation, the public square, you want an environment that's biblical and free, as opposed to what the Democrats now represent, secular and statist. And for those that are not familiar with the term statist, it includes a form of government of socialism, but it's more than that. The actual definition of statism involves the government as the final authority, the government as the final act and agent of redemption. So most people should have a problem with this if they believe in eternal truths. And so defining the culture war, recognizing that that's what's at stake going into 2020, we can then learn to appreciate that this impeachment is just a continuum of the Democrats attempting to get a hold of power so that they can continue to move the country to the secular left, so that they can then build out big government. Those that are on the side of President Trump and that are continuing to support him in his efforts are understanding that we need to be a biblical and free country. We need to recognize, first of all, the humanity of the unborn in the womb. And this is what the courts are about. The president's been able to appoint or get on the bench now 160 federal judges, a couple of them on the Supreme Court. We have about 20 more to go. Those that come from a biblical perspective understand and appreciate what it means to define family in a traditional form. They understand that if you don't marry and then produce children, that you can run into other types of challenges. And so the list is long about why now you're seeing the independents say, wait a minute, perhaps my open-mindedness is leading me to the point that I also have to make a choice. I have to choose, because what we've seen over the last week and a half of the so-called infraction to the Constitution worthy of upseating a duly elected president to impeach him for some discussion on a phone call is not acceptable. Based on the testimonies that we've heard so far, there's nothing there. There's no there. And this week, they're trying to increase the energy, but I have to agree with Rick that what we're looking at is just a disruption of this presidency, trying to not only stop his international affairs, but also his domestic affairs, and they've been for the good. They've been in support of the people that want a country that's biblical and free.
Thank you so much, Star. I want to also let our listeners know at any time that you have a question, please press 0 on your keypad so we can get to your questions. Again, please just press 0 so we can get to those questions and hear your voices as well. Star, you were talking about just impeding the process of the president, impeding the process of even the great work that this administration has done. There have been some great victories, particularly for the urban community. Can you speak to that, the great victories that this administration has been able to have, and what that means to so many of our clergy that are listening on this call right now?
Well, yes, and thank you for that, because it goes to this question of impeachment as well. What the Democrats know is that the black community is slipping away from them, and they're doing anything they can to try to get that community back into their lane so that they can continue the damage that they've been doing, not just to Christianity, but also to capitalism and also to our Constitution. Because when you think about the president and how his numbers are starting to move in the black community to the positive, it means that black communities are noticing that that he's fixing their communities. The first thing he did was fix the economy. When you're talking about the record number of the unemployment alone, is not the full story. Unemployment numbers are down in Black communities, but also abortion numbers are down in Black communities. Also, food stamp numbers are down in Black communities. Also, crime numbers are down in Black communities. So Blacks are starting to feel a little bit more comfortable. When you have a little money in your pocket, you seem to start thinking about other parts of your life. You start thinking about education and the options that your children may or may not have. So when you put that in the political sphere, you start listening to the party that's saying money should follow children to the schools parents want, which is not something Democrats want. They do not want children to leave the government funded and union-controlled schools. And so when we think about Black America, one other thing that's happening now that Blacks have a little bit more money in their pocket and they're able to think beyond just tomorrow, is they're going into business now in record numbers. The data just came out through the Wall Street Journal that Blacks are very high in taking those risks to say maybe now is the time to start that business. And I think one reason that Blacks are starting to think that now is the time to start that business that we've always wanted is because of the Opportunity Zone initiative that the president signed into an executive order. In the tax bill, there was an incentive for capital to go into our most distressed zip codes. This administration outlined where those distressed zip codes are, and there are 8,700 of them in the country. So when the tax bill was signed into law 2 years ago now, that was implemented, meaning that now capital can go find its fruit and its, in these neighborhoods to where if you plant money into those neighborhoods and leave that money there for 10 years, you will not have a capital gains tax. One thing that we all know is money is fungible. Money isn't racist. Money goes where it can make more of itself. Its nature is to make more of itself, to produce. It'll go abroad. It'll go to China. It'll go anywhere it needs to go. But now it's being channeled into these most distressed zip codes as a result of this president's Opportunity Zone initiative. So what does that mean for people that live or serve in these most distressed zip codes? It means now they're starting to see some revitalization. Folks want to term it gentrification so that they can pretend that, whites are just displacing Blacks. But that is not what's happening. What's really occurring is revitalization in these communities because capital is coming in and it's restructuring things so that people can get jobs, so that building will occur, so that now there's a tax base, so the neighborhoods can get street lights and sidewalks. And the next thing you know, you have healthy families, and then it fixes your schools. So there are a lot of things that the president has done that's getting attention from the African American community, and that's why you're seeing the most aggressive pushers of this impeachment are those that represent those communities. They do not want those communities changed. They don't want them fixed. They like the ghetto, and they like being the big chief over the ghetto. And all of that is being upset right now because of President Trump.
Right. Well, you hit on something right there, Star, when you talked about focusing on that family unit. We have so many callers coming in. I actually want to get to one of those questions now. Steve from Georgia. Please come on in and speak and share your question.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
We do.
Good. Okay. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for allowing me. I met Star Parker in person in Augusta. She came here to speak at a Planned Parenthood meeting about 7-8 years ago, something like that. She was excellent, gave a great talk. From that time forward, I bought into the whole thing with Star Parker. I don't know much about her personally, but her story was great. I read about it a little bit in the background. I really like what you're doing. My question is, or it's almost like a statement, I think we're allowing ourselves to be led by the nose by the Democrats in the wrong direction, meaning it's a distraction. This whole thing with the impeachment, I think, is silly. I think, like you've just quoted the figures, independents are increasing their disdain for the impeachment process. I think what Starr said about the families and the improvement zones and the 87 zip codes and all that, that's where we ought to focus our attention on. I almost wish the Republican members of Congress would not attend these hearings, even though they're public. Let the Democrats show themselves to be silly. Let them show to be picking on individual strange words that come out of the mouths of various people who are almost no never mind people. They're underlings that really don't, they didn't hear the real conversation, and even if they did, the real conversation's out there, and we all know it's silly. So I'm trying not to get off track. I'm trying to stay focused on. I like what Star Parker's doing. I like this association she's made with the ministers and pastors nationwide, trying to focus on family values. My number one deal is I believe that our big problem is moms and dads are not, enough of them are not staying together and raising their family, their children, themselves to be responsible, capable, self-supporting adults. That's what parents should do. It's not in the Constitution, but it seems pretty natural to me. So it frustrates me that nationwide that family unit is falling apart, and our government seems to be either ignoring it or they know what's happening. And it's what Starr said, they're trying to trap people into the government plantation with welfare money and food stamps and yada, yada. So I feel like we ought to be, Starr and the rest with CURE, which I really like the organization, we ought to almost ignore this silliness that's going on with attempted impeachment and focus on the real issues that cause people's lives to get better, such as the improvement in those 87 zip codes. So I know I rambled in what I said, so it's really, my question is I think we ought to not allow ourselves to be distracted by basically this sideshow and continue to focus on those issues that help people's lives, and in the long run, that will pay dividends versus these short-range headlines that bombard us day to day.
Thank you, Steve.
Well, Steve, thank you. You know, actually, the good news is that's exactly what is occurring. You know, people start to say a lot, oh, my gosh, how is the president able to continue with all of this distraction of impeachment? He has placed good people in his White House and in his administration that are continuing to get these things done. You're absolutely right. Family is one of our major focuses, and at CURE, we're working very, very closely with the White House on their Opportunity Zone initiative, and right now advising on the homeless question, because when the president went to California and saw that situation himself, he said to his team, fix it. And what we're doing is fixing it, coming up with the ideas and the structures so that we can actually fix the homeless challenge that's in front of our nation right now. This is not a housing problem at all. So one of the first order business is to get the discussion going that this is not about housing when it comes to the homeless. So you're absolutely right. Focusing on those 8,700 zip codes is our passion at CURE. We want the weakest link strengthened. We're after the lost sheep. We want to make sure that everyone understands that this country is free for them as well, and that the set of circumstances that they were born into do not have to be their future. So therefore, here are the opportunities that Republicans are putting in front of you. One is to be able to get your children into schools where they teach the value system that you're going to need to be successful. Two is to make sure that jobs are being developed in your own communities through this movement of taxation. When you start reducing taxes and regulation, money comes to those communities or places where it can make more of itself. So you're absolutely right. There is a lot of focus going on, but you're not in the media for sure, because this circus has taken all of that energy. But make no mistake, those of us that are working aggressively on changing the policies while it is day, we're working on those things. So you can be encouraged. One other point I want to make regarding family is and the crises we're in, it is incredibly challenging, because when you look at the 60s, we had 75% of the adult population married. Today we have less than 50. It's right near 47% of the adult population married. So this is not only creating social problems that you pointed to, where people then become more dependent on government, but it's also creating housing problems. Because when you think about the economic concept of supply and demand, when you have more single adults that want to live in cities, they put pressure and demand on the marketplace, and it's just not the normal course of what would happen when you have a traditional husband married to the mother of the children. They move to the suburbs. So there are a lot of areas that are being impacted by the differences in our culture now because of public policy. A lot of this points straight back to the 60s and the development of this grand welfare experiment. It goes right back to the Great Society. The out-of-marriage birth rates now have moved tremendously. In the Black community, they moved from 22% in the 60s to 72% today. In the white community, the out-of-marriage birth rates moved from 3% in the 60s to 30% today. So this is more challenge for us. $900 billion a year out of our federal budget are spent on anti-poverty programs. So yes, we are focusing on trying to move these things back to the states so that people can live free in this wonderful country of ours, meaning that they are responsible with their choices and that they have opportunity to make money and take care of their families.
Excellent.
So if I could add one thing onto that, if I could add just one thing.
Yes,
one thing I've observed about President Trump is that he doesn't view blacks as votes. He views them as people. And as a result, the actions he takes isn't about a political calculus. It's about what's going to help lift people out of poverty and towards self-sufficiency. And so his calculus is completely different than what traditional politicians do because he's not a politician. And that's why you see Donald Trump say they're implementing policies that in fact will benefit constituencies that by and large don't vote for him. And
right.
Because he doesn't care about that. What he cares about is giving people the opportunity to live the lives as Americans that they are entitled to and not have the government be in the way and obstruct that. And so that's the difference. And it's a difference that I think is having a political benefit for him. But the intent isn't to gain votes, it's to actually help people live their lives the way that they should be able to live them, as opposed to being impoverished by government.
Excellent.
That's exactly right.
Remind our callers, I'm going to go to another call here, but if you are just calling in, you have questions, please press 0 on your keypad. I'm actually going to go to Pastor Thomas out of Washington, D.C. Please speak to us.
Yes, I just want to say to Star, congratulations on her book signing and her new book. And it's really addressing the time of what we are talking about right now. One of the things I wanted to ask is how we can synchronize all of the accomplishments as you have laid out and articulated so well of all the things that our president has done, that we all as pastors will be on the same talking sheet. I found that a lot of our people in our communities don't have a clue of what the president is doing. And when I share with them about the historical black colleges and universities, what he has done for those schools, they say, what? They sound shocked.
That's right.
And so, but I believe we can be really empowered with the information that we can just go down the list to share what's going on. The second thing I want to indicate is this is a great time to embrace Kanye West because it seems like he's going in a direction, at least peripherally. I don't know him personally, but it seems like he's going in a direction that we want to embrace and reaching our young people as well. So I don't know whether we have any thoughts about that and how to. Yes.
I was thinking about that the other day, Pastor. I thought about it the other day. I said, now, who would have ever thought that under the leadership of Donald Trump, Kanye West would be born again? I mean, if that's not a celebration moment right there. In fact, every time I hear him, I think about what myself coming out of a life of criminal activity and drug activity and sexual activity, and then getting to that born again experience and then changing my life. So you're absolutely right that this is something that should be celebrated, and we can also thank Donald Trump for that particular introduction for Kanye to say, something's gone wrong, and it opened him up for the Lord to say, and I've got the answer over here. To your first question about the accomplishments, thank you for that, because I'm working also very closely with the RNC, Kamala Prince over there, and then Katrina Pearson over at the campaign to come up with that list. In fact, I actually have already written it out for them, 10 places that we know the president has done specifically for the black community. So you will have that probably after the first of the year, not just in email or, the invisible way, but also in print so that we can distribute in the community through beauty shops and barber shops and through churches to let them know that here's some of the accomplishments. You're absolutely right. They bailed out 22 of the historical black colleges with the emphasis to say, now we have the Opportunity Zone Initiative on the table. You guys are in these zones. Let's build. Let's do something. Let's participate in these local communities through these structures that are already in place through the 100 historical black colleges that are still here. But the list is very long. What he did for the VA, all of the vets that are in Black America, although we're about 13, 14% of the population, we're almost 20% military. And now, if you were a vet, you can go to any specialist you want anywhere in the country instead of having to wait at the VA to die, frankly. So that's one of the things. What he did through the BUILD Act, they signed into law the BUILD Act, which means that all of that capital that used to go to China, who's decided that they want to, hunker down into their communism, that money can now flow into all types of African countries that are friendly territories to the United States. And that's being handled through the State Department under the leadership of Sam Brownback, who's now over there doing the religious liberty effort. So the list is long. He signed into law that now Camp Nelson is a national memorial. This is the place where, in Kentucky, to where when Abraham Lincoln signed into law emancipation, remember the slave states that didn't secede, the slaves were still slaves, and Kentucky was one of those states. So the Union Army said, well, if you come here, we're going to let you have freedom. And thousands of blacks came there, signed up for the Union Army. That's one of the only memorials in the country where blacks and white soldiers are buried together and have been since that Civil War. And it's Donald Trump that signed that place into law, that now it's a national memorial that people can go and visit. So the list is very long. I can't put it here, but thank you for your question. You will have those talking points when we get into election season, which is going to be right about Black History Month. We will unveil the tremendous things that have been done for people who have moved in this country from slavery through Jim Crow to this new opportunity of freedom and breaking the chains of what the welfare state put on top of them after moving through slavery and Jim Crow.
Star, if I could just say 2 seconds about Kanye. I just want people to know that we spent a lot of time talking about the darkness that our country faces, that our world faces. And many people wonder, where's God? Well, you know where God is? God shows up in the most amazing, mysterious ways. He shows up in Kanye West. Kanye West. Okay? That's where God shows up. And it's really hard for me as a practicing Christian for a long time to sit there and embrace somebody who's new. But you know what Kanye West does? He's so filled with the Holy Spirit that he doesn't care. He's a new believer. He's giving us all energy to be able to speak the gospel and speak the truth. And so that's why I sit there and I look at this and I say, Kanye West, that's God showing up and showing off. And what we need to do is we need to pray for his protection, because Satan is going to attack this man viciously. And we need to pray for his protection and get our congregants to pray for his protection, because he needs a shield, because he doesn't have the word yet embedded in him, because he hasn't learned it. So he needs that shield now while he's fresh and raw, so he doesn't end up being destroyed by Satan as he seeks to do God's will. So that's, and I'm preaching to the choir here, I know, but I just really feel, I say this everywhere, and it's so important because he's making a massive difference for Christ. And that, to me, all this other stuff, that's the primary purpose. Getting government off our back so we can do that is what on the political side, and allowing people to be empowered by their own lives is the political side. But ultimately, if we're not bringing them to Christ, the rest of it's wasted.
Star, the liberal black establishment has really taken a pretty aggressive lead on impeachment. Rep. Al Green said, I'm concerned if we don't impeach this president, he will be reelected. And of course, Maxine Waters, no relation to me, was perhaps the first member of Congress to call for impeachment even before he was inaugurated. You're one of the voices out there that have been speaking against the black liberal establishment. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, they see their power slipping away. Don't forget, before Donald Trump decided to run for the presidency, he was very popular in black communities because he was an actor on a show that they liked, a reality show. He's very popular because of that celebrity that he brings to the table. But there are some common denominators in Donald Trump and in the African American community. One is brutal honesty and one is brutal loyalty. And so blacks are gravitating there. Now, why is it important to Democrats to do impeachment and to keep and the Black Caucus, every single one of their members, to try to impeach him? Because they know the numbers. They know what's happened in this country. They know that there are 180 million Americans from European descent and there are 140 million Americans from other. Those others are the ones that traditionally Democrats have held in their corner over the last 50 years. Prior to 50 years, blacks were more Republican, as I point out in my new column this week. But when you think about the ethnics, let's look at the top three ethnic categories. The Asian community, 29% poll as conservatives and 29% vote for Republicans. In the Latino community, 28% poll as conservative and 25 to 28% vote with Republicans. It's the black community that is now awakening to what is happening with the Republican Party and what the interests have been and what they represent. And 22% of African Americans are now polling as conservative, but only 8% vote for Republican. So that means that there are 14% of black people out there that are voting against their values. These are the ones that are listening to these discussions, and that's why this smoke of impeachment is now amongst us, so that it can cloud up the room, so that people won't hear through all of that noise and see the accomplishments of this president and reelect him. This is all about 2020. It's, as all of the Congressional Black Caucus members that you have mentioned have said themselves and knew from the very beginning, if this man gets away with doing what he promised to do, we're history, because the black community will be a part of reelecting him.
Phenomenal, Star. And I just want to, for those that just jumped on, we are having a tremendous discussion, and we mentioned that this will be about a 30-minute call. First of all, I want to let you know that we're going to be having these calls more and more often, and we want you to be a part of that discussion, and we're going to wrap this discussion up. And I wanted to let you know also, for those who have questions, you want to connect with us more, please email us at clergy@urbancure.org. If you joined the call late, again, my name is Reverend Tim Lateef. I direct the National Cure Clergy Network, and just been a tremendous discussion. Before we do conclude, though, Stars, we mentioned in the beginning briefly your new book, co-authored with Richard Manning, who's on this call as well. Just an exciting time. Just wanted you all just to share briefly about Necessary Noise and just the excitement that's taking place because of this book.
Richard, you want to take it, and then I'll close us out. Is Richard still there?
Richard?
Uh-oh.
Maybe we lost Richard.
All right. We lost Richard. Well, then I'll close it out. Yes, Necessary Noise. The subtitle is How Donald Trump Inflames the Culture War and Why This is Good News for America. And I hope everyone will buy a copy so that we will be able to get a bigger voice in this culture war, in these discussions that we're having, by making a bestseller list and then being able to go on and promote the principles that we believe in, the principles of Christianity, the virtues of capitalism, the rule of law that's outlined in our Constitution. What I did in Necessary Noise, along with Richard, is looked at 5 places that are extremely noisy right now, but I believe are necessary for us to have these discussions so that we can heal our country. I look at the swamp noise, what's happening in Washington, D.C. I look at the intolerance noise. How did we get to the place where, from a country of e pluribus unum, many becoming one, that we morphed into multiculturalism, and which is now Marxism? When I look at number 3, the gender war, who would have thought that the T meant thruples and these trans who are now pushing the church into non-existence? I look at the black noise. Why is it that we're allowing people to get away with anarchy by saying they don't need the police? No police, you have no peace. And then, of course, the final chapter or part, I look at the opportunity noise. What is at stake going into 2020? Because as Abraham Lincoln said, the last time we had this type of culture war, where we had a big moral crisis, we had a big crime against humanity on the table. He said we can't go on like this anymore. He opened the scriptures. He read the words of Jesus Christ himself, that a house divided against itself cannot stand. So that's the choice going into 2020. Are we going to be biblical and free, or are we going to be secular and statist? And it's going to get very, very noisy over the next year. So I thought perhaps we should equip people with language they need to make the case that this is really the question on the table. Are we going left or are we going right?
Thank you so much, Star. And you mentioned that healing and the transformation. I want to get one more caller in, just a phenomenal story before we conclude, and then we'll wrap up. But Marlene out of San Francisco, California, please speak to us.
Star, I met you 25 years ago in San Francisco after I'd been listening to you on KSFO radio. Are you there?
Oh, my goodness. Yes. Oh, my
gosh.
I
Your very first book signing, to have you sign my book. It was Horse Pimps, and I didn't like the title, but it was
Pimps,
a great
Whores,
book.
and Welfare Brats. Pimps, Whores, and Welfare Brats, my autobiography.
Yeah, it was, and I knew that the Lord had his hand on you, and I had to come over and talk to you. I'm getting emotional about it. I had to come over, and I held your hand, and you had one of your little kids with you and your husband in this little hotel in San Francisco, and we prayed. And I said, Lord, I know you have a reason for Star to be in this business. And here 25 years later, you're with the president. You're doing this awesome work for the Lord. You're doing something that nobody else could do. And I just thank you for what you've done, for not only for the Black community, but for all of us Christians. You've given us hope, and you've given us faith in our country when it's gone through so much darkness that we have no hope. Thank you, Star. And I want to know, finally, how can we pray for you?
Well, you can pray for my safety for sure. Thank you so much, because we are in that war, and it's going to get much more messy. And so being on the front line is challenging. I'm actually in a security protection program even as we speak, which means that I'm very limited in things I can now do as a free agent. But I so appreciate your compliments. This is an interesting ending question or call because I'm getting ready to have my birthday. I'm going on vacation, and it's just and we're moving into Thanksgiving. So thank you for being with us and supporting me for so long. And you are my encouragement to keep going. I think truth is on our side, and I think that's what drives me to do this work. So I so appreciate that you appreciate it and that you're noticing.
Well, thank you, Star. This is Matt Waters, the Senior Director of Development. We want to wrap up this call. We want to thank everyone who's participated and let you know that Star and many of our staff are on the road. We'll be in Dallas in January. We'll be in Raleigh in January. We'll be in Seattle. We'll be in Florida. So you may get an email.
In December.
Yes, in December, and and we're adding more and more dates. We've got some Southern California dates. Looks like in January as well. So if you're interested in those things, again, reach out to us. You can reach me at matt@urbancure.org, and we can get that information out to you. Of course, you can also make a contribution anytime at urbancure.org. And pick up a copy of Star's book, too. And I think you'll be delighted to hear the work that she's doing to talk about these cultural wars that continue to inflame and get hotter by the minute. But we appreciate all of you. We thank you. And we will be back in touch with you soon with an upcoming phone call. God bless.